In this video we will be talking about which characters in The Sopranos resemble real-life mobsters and certain actions that occur. Not saying the characters are strictly based off some of the real mobsters in the video, but certain parallels between characters and real-life mobsters. Let's get straight into it. First, let's talk about the Gambinos. Butchie was similar to Sammy the Bull. He was a very hot-headed character who wasn't scared to step to anybody. There was even the scene here where in the hospital where Tony visits Phil, Butchie is sitting in the doorway trying to bully Tony. Another scene that is similar to him having a Sammy the Bull similarity is when they put a hit out on Doc Santoro. Butchie waited for Doc to leave the restaurant where gunmen came out of nowhere and killed Doc, and then you see Butchie making sure it's done. And he drives away. Similar to when Big Paul Castellano was gunned down in front of Sparks Steakhouse while Sammy the Bull was also waiting to make sure everything went right according to their plan. The scene where Tony tells the family he will not deliver Tony B up to Johnny Sack is a similar incident that happened with Sammy the Bull. Sammy talked about a situation very similar on his podcast. Sammy the Bull asked another family to hand over a guy to him. Instead they killed him themselves, out of fear that he would not make it quick, which is what Tony Soprano did to his cousin Tony B. Carmine Sr. resembled Big Paul Castellano. Castellano identified more as a businessman than a criminal, taking over non-legitimate businesses and converting them to legitimate enterprises. Carmine Sr. did this in The Sopranos with the HUD scam with Tony, turning houses into a legitimate income stream, along with the Esplanade. Although Carmine Sr. was very respected among everyone in the mafia underworld in The Sopranos, the same cannot be said about Big Paul Castellano, where he wasn't liked as much, and he was hanging out more with businessmen than his actual mafia members. Johnny Sack, who has a John Gotti-like presence, dressed well, and was also hot-headed like John Gotti. Johnny Sack tries to put a hit out on Carmine, which was similar to how John Gotti was wanting to take out Big Paul Castellano. Johnny Sack came to Tony Soprano and asked him to murder Lopertazzi Captain Rusty Milio. John Gotti also requested another family, the De Cavalcante family, to kill Fred Weiss. The murder of Fred Weiss wasn't so different than when Rusty was killed. Rusty was gunned down in his car, while Fred Weiss was by his car when he was killed. Johnny Sack and John Gotti were both incarcerated in a prison but later transferred to the United States Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. They both died from cancer. Christopher is parallel to Anthony Bruno Indelicato, who was part of the Bonanno family. Bruno Indelicato also had a father who was killed, much like Christopher. Also, Bruno was heavy into coke, and at one point, allegedly took a shot at John Gotti while high. Much like Christopher drawing down on Tony at the Bing and him shooting Tony's car is a reference to this incident with Bruno Indelicato, as the incident with he and Gotti occurred while driving on the Van Wyck Expressway. Indelicato was shooting at Gotti's car, while Angelo Ruggiero was driving him. Vito Spatafore is another character with a very direct parallel. The real-life mobster John D'Amato was also a North Jersey mafioso. John D'Amato was an acting boss of the De Cavalcante crime family in New Jersey. D'Amato was a made man of the De Cavalcante family and appointed head by Giovanni Ricci under the influence of Gambino boss John Gotti. D'Amato was suspected of engaging in homosexual activity in Brooklyn in January 1992. He was discovered by another connected guy at a gay nightclub and killed, much like Vito Spatafore. Salvatore Bonpensiero had some similarities to Gregory Scarpa Sr. Scarpa, being a feared hitman, was also a government informant. Known for having played both sides against the middle, much like Bonpensiero attempts to do. Tony even refers to Sal at one point as a stone gangster when he talks to Vin Makazian, when Vin tells Tony that Sal is an informant. Junior Soprano and his faking Alzheimer's, and eventually falling to the illness, is based very closely on the former boss of the Genovese family, Vincent "The Chin" Giganti. The Chin was known mostly as the Odd Father. He would dress in a tattered blue bathrobe, much like Junior does on several occasions. He would be seen either walking around, or being escorted around Greenwich Village talking to trees, nodding and talking to himself, and just generally acting peculiar. He did this whole charade in order to hide the fact that he was the boss of the Genovese family, and in order to plead insanity when charged. This worked for him several times, and was only caught due to an incontrovertible amount of evidence. It is also widely speculated that he eventually did actually become mentally ill, just like Junior Soprano. Phil Leotardo and Bucci had a similar parallel to Vic Amuso and Anthony Gaspipe Casso, were at one point trying to put a hit out on the entire New Jersey faction, while Bucci and Phil wanted to take them out because of redundant upper management that bleeds off half the kick. Paulie Walnuts, played by Tony Sirico, was actually just himself. He was associated with the Colombo crime family. In one of the episodes he says, "I lived through the 70s by the skin of my nuts when the Colombos were going at it, referring the war with Crazy Joe Gallo." I know why you are wondering what Agent Harris is doing in this video. Well, let me explain. When Harris is informed by his co-worker that Phil was killed due to Agent Harris leaking Phil's payphone locations, he said, "We're gonna win this thing." Special Agent Lindley Del Vecchio, who was leaking information to the Scarpa faction of the Persico family war, actually said, "We're gonna win this thing," in his office in front of other agents when informed that a faction rival had been killed. That's all for this video. Consider subscribing, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section.